I've been restoring antique furniture for 6 years now. I know the difference between the smell of dry rot and the smell of neglect. I know how to date a piece by the joinery of a drawer or the patina on a brass handle. I consider myself a rational man, a craftsman who works with his hands. I deal in wood, varnish, and history. I don't deal in ghost stories. At least I didn't until last Tuesday. It was an estate sale off a gravel road near Middlebury, Vermont. The listing had been sparse, no photos, just a vague description of vintage household items and an address that my GPS struggled to pin down. When I pulled my truck up the winding, overgrown driveway, I almost turned back. The house was a looming Victorian monstrosity, the white paint peeling away like dead skin to reveal gray, water-damaged wood underneath. The windows looked dark, like eyes that had seen too much and decided to shut forever. The air inside was stale, smelling of mothballs and something sharper like copper pennies left in a jar of water. There weren't many people there, just a bored-looking liquidator from the city and a few locals picking through boxes of old clothes. I found the desk in the study. It was magnificent. A late 19th century American roll top, solid quarter-sawn oak with a grain that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. It was a beast of a piece, easily 400 pounds. I ran my hand along the surface. The finish was original, alligatoring slightly but salvageable. But the main attraction was the storage. It had 2 pedestals, each supporting the desktop. I crouched down to inspect the joinery. Dovetail joints, hand cut. I counted the drawers automatically. It's a habit of mine to check for missing hardware. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the left pillar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the right pillar. 12 drawers. Perfect symmetry. The brass pulls were tarnished black, but original. "You interested in the monster?" the liquidator asked, appearing suddenly in the doorway. He looked tired, bags under his eyes dark enough to be bruises. He wouldn't step into the room. He hovered in the hallway. "How much?" I asked, standing up and wiping dust from my jeans. 200. "If you can haul it out today." My heart hammered. A piece like this, fully restored, could fetch $3 grand in Boston easily. 200 was robbery. "Deal," I said, before he could change his mind. Loading it was a nightmare. Even with the liquidator helping reluctantly and my dolly, getting it up the ramp into my Ford F-150 took nearly 40 minutes. I was sweating through my flannel shirt by the time I strapped it down. As I tightened the ratchet straps, I looked back at the house. I swear I saw a curtain twitch in the upstairs window, even though the place was supposed to be empty. I drove home with the radio off, listening to the heavy oak shift and creak in the bed of the truck. I brought it into my workshop, a converted barn behind my house, and set it in the center of the room. It dominated the space. The 12 drawers stared back at me, shut tight. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, the thrill of a good find. But as I locked the workshop door that night, leaving the desk alone in the dark, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. It felt less like I had brought home a piece of furniture, and more like I had invited a guest that I didn't know how to ask to leave. I didn't sleep well that first night. I told myself it was buyer's remorse, or maybe just the physical toll of hauling that monstrosity. By the next evening, though, the itch to start working was too strong to ignore. I'm a night owl by trade. The silence of the workshop is usually my sanctuary. It was around 1:45 a.m. The rest of the property was dead quiet, save for the occasional hoot of a barred owl in the tree line. I had the shop lights buzzing overhead, casting stark, clinical shadows across the concrete floor. I was scrubbing the desk down with mineral spirits and fine steel wool, trying to cut through decades of grime and furniture wax. The smell was intense, that chemical, biting scent of spirits mixed with the underlying musk of old oak. It made my head swim a little. I remember stepping back to wipe sweat from my forehead. My back was aching a sharp, dull throb at the base of my spine. I leaned against my workbench, sipping lukewarm coffee, and just stared at the piece. That's when the symmetry felt wrong. As a restorer, my eyes are trained to spot imperfections. A leg that's a millimeter shorter, a handle that's slightly askew. Looking at the desk, the left pedestal seemed denser than the right, taller somehow, though the top was perfectly level. I narrowed my eyes. The brass handles caught the light in a vertical row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I blinked. I felt a cold prickle of confusion run down my arms. I set my coffee mug down. The ceramic clink sounded too loud in the empty room. I walked closer, wiping my hands on my apron. "Okay," I whispered. My voice sounded thin. I pointed at the drawers on the left side, counting aloud this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There were 7 drawers. I was staring right at them. They weren't smaller to accommodate the extra space. The wood of the pedestal seemed to have physically elongated to fit the 7th drawer. It looked seamless, natural, as if it had always been that way. The 7th drawer was wedged near the bottom, its brass handle slightly darker, more tarnished than the others. I reached out to touch it. My fingers were inches from the wood, when the overhead light flickered just a quick buzzing dim and snapped back to full brightness. I flinched, pulling my hand back. When I looked down, there were 6 drawers. I stood there for a long time, my breathing shallow. I counted again. 6. I measured the height with my tape measure. Standard 30 inches. I counted the right side. 6. "You need sleep, man," I muttered, rubbing my face aggressively with my palms until I saw spots. "You're inhaling fumes and you're exhausted." That was the logical explanation. It was a visual trick, a combination of shadows and fatigue. I forced a laugh, but it didn't sound right. It sounded nervous. I packed up my tools quickly. I didn't cover the desk with a drop cloth like I usually do. I just wanted to get out of there. As I turned off the lights and locked the door, I didn't look back at the desk. But as I walked across the dark yard to my house, I could have sworn I heard a sound from inside the barn behind me. A soft, sliding sound, like a drawer rolling open on dry wood. I stayed out of the workshop for the next 48 hours. I told myself I was busy with paperwork, catching up on invoices for a client in Montpelier. But the truth was, I didn't want to look at that oak behemoth again. I kept the barn door padlocked. I even pulled the blinds down in my kitchen, so I wouldn't have to see the silhouette of the workshop against the night sky. But you can't lock out sound. 2 nights later, I woke up with a jolt. I was drenched in sweat. The sheets tangled around my legs like vines. The room was dead silent, but my ears were ringing. I rolled over and looked at the digital clock on my nightstand. 3 a.m. Not 2:59, not 3:1. The red digits burned in the darkness. Then I heard it. It was coming from outside, cutting through the insulation of the house. A low, rhythmic, grinding noise. Ruh, 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 click. It sounded like heavy timber sliding against heavy timber, dry and unlubricated. It was the sound of a drawer opening and closing, over and over again, but amplified, as if the wood itself was screaming. I sat up, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking. Click. I grabbed the heavy mag light I keep under the bed and threw on a pair of jeans. I didn't bother with a shirt. I marched downstairs, convinced it was a raccoon or a drifter trying to break into the barn. I wanted it to be a drifter I could deal with. The air outside was biting cold for October. The grass was wet, soaking my bare feet instantly. As I got closer to the workshop, the sound stopped. Abruptly, the silence that followed was heavy, like the air pressure had suddenly dropped. I stood before the double doors of the barn. The padlock was still secure, unbroken. I fumbled with the key, my hand shaking so bad I dropped it once into the mud. "Damn it," I hissed, snatching it up. I unlocked the mechanism and swung the door open, sweeping the beam of my flashlight across the dark interior. "Who's there?" I shouted. The beam cut through the dust motes and landed on the desk. I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. The desk sat in the center of the room, exactly where I'd left it, but the geometry was broken. The roll top was up, and there, directly in the center of the desk, in the knee-hole space where a chair should slide in, was a drawer that hadn't been there before. It wasn't like the others. The original 12 drawers were golden oak with patinaed brass handles. This new one, the 13th drawer, was pitch black. It looked like the wood had been charred or stained with ink. It was narrow, maybe 4 inches wide, and it sat suspended in the air between the 2 pedestals, defying gravity. There were no runners, no supports. It just was. And it was open. Just an inch. I took a step closer, the flashlight beam trembling in my hand. The smell hit me then. It didn't smell like old wood anymore. It smelled like a thunderstorm, thick with ozone and something underneath it. something sweet and rotting, like wet flowers left on a grave. I counted the drawers, desperate for sanity. 6 on the left, 6 on the right, and the black one in the middle, 13. I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't tired. I was wide awake, standing in a freezing barn, looking at an impossible object that was waiting for me to close it. I didn't want to touch it. Every instinct I had, every primal alarm bell in my DNA, was screaming at me to run back to the house, lock the door, and burn the barn to the ground. But curiosity is a sickness. It pulls you in like a rip current. I walked forward. The air got colder with every step, a sharp, unnatural chill that bit through my jeans. By the time I reached the desk, I could see my breath pluming in the flashlight beam. The black drawer sat there, hovering in the empty space between the pedestals. Up close, the finish wasn't just stained. It looked charred, like wood that had been pulled from a house fire, but refused to turn to ash. I reached out. My hand was shaking so violently, the flashlight beam danced across the wall. I hooked my finger into the small iron pole. It was freezing so cold it felt wet. I pulled. There was no friction, no sound of wood sliding on wood. It glided open with a greasy, silent ease. The smell hit me instantly, gagging me. It wasn't just ozone anymore. It was the smell of wet earth, deep and damp, the smell of a freshly dug hole in the rain. I shone the light inside. There was no bottom. The drawer was only 4 inches deep on the outside, but my flashlight beam cut down into a vertical shaft of infinite darkness. I leaned over, peering into the abyss. The light just ended. It was swallowed whole by the blackness. It was like looking down a well that went through the floor, through the earth, and into something else entirely. Resting on the very lip of the drawer, balanced precariously on the edge of that impossible drop, was a single small square of white paper. A Polaroid. I picked it up with trembling fingers. The chemical smell of the developing fluid was still fresh, overpowering the rot for a second. The photo was still developing, the image milky and vague. I watched, paralyzed, as the colors saturated in the beam of my flashlight. Gray shadows, a white expanse. A lump in the middle. It was a bed. My bed. The angle was impossible. It was taken from directly above, flush against the ceiling, looking straight down. In the center of the frame was a man sleeping on his side, one arm thrown over his eyes, legs tangled in a blue quilt. It was me. I looked closer, bringing the photo inches from my eyes. The red digital numbers of the alarm clock on the nightstand were visible in the corner of the shot, 2:58 a.m. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at my watch. It was 3:05 a.m. This photo had been taken 7 minutes ago, while I was asleep, by something hovering on my ceiling. I dropped the photo. It fluttered into the open drawer and vanished into the silent dark. I didn't hear it hit a bottom. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in my kitchen with a butcher knife on the table, staring at the back door. By the time the sun came up, the terror had dulled into a manic, desperate need for logic. Ghosts don't take Polaroids. Intruders do. Stalkers do. I convinced myself that someone had been hiding in the rafters of the barn. Maybe the previous owner's kid, messed up in the head, playing tricks. It was a flimsy theory, but it was better than admitting the furniture was eating reality. I spent the morning turning the workshop upside down. I checked every inch of the loft, the rafters, the crawl space. Nothing. No footprints in the dust. No disturbed insulation. At noon, I drove to Best Buy and bought a high-end wireless security camera with night vision and a motion trigger. I mounted it on the support beam directly facing the desk. I duct taped the power cord to the ceiling so no one could unplug it without a ladder. Then, I padlocked the barn from the outside with a new, heavy-duty master lock. I set up my command station at the kitchen table. Laptop open, live stream running. The feed was crisp, 1080p black and white. The desk sat there, dormant. 12 drawers. Closed. I watched for hours. My eyes burned. The sun went down, and the infrared clicked on, turning the workshop into a ghostly negative image. I drank 4 cups of coffee, my leg bouncing nervously under the table. 1 a.m. Nothing. 2 a.m. Nothing. A moth flew past the lens, triggering a motion alert that nearly gave me a heart attack. 2:55 a.m. I leaned closer to the screen. The silence in the house was heavy, pressing against my eardrums. 2:59 a.m. I held my breath. "Come on," I whispered. "Show me who you are." The timestamp on the screen ticked over. 3 hours. The feed glitched. It wasn't a connection error. The image didn't freeze. It tore. A band of digital static, like crushed colored glass, slashed horizontally across the screen. The audio spiked, a high-pitched electronic screech that made me rip my headphones off. Then the image stabilized. The barn doors were still closed. The windows were still intact. But the desk had changed. On the screen, grainy but unmistakable, the 13th drawer was there. I stared at the laptop, feeling the blood drain from my face. I hadn't taken my eyes off the feed. No one had walked into the frame. The drawer hadn't slid open. The video had simply skipped a frame, deleting the reality where the drawer was closed and replacing it with the reality where it was open. And then, the motion detector went off. A red box appeared on the screen, highlighting the center of the void. Something was moving inside the drawer. On the pixelated screen, I saw a faint gray blur rise from the black slot. It looked like smoke or steam. It swirled in the air for a second, then dissipated. I grabbed the laptop with both hands, ready to throw it, but then a notification popped up on the screen. Not from the camera software. It was a text file, opening itself on my desktop. I hadn't touched the keyboard. The document opened. It was blank, except for one line typed in a default font. "I am still hungry." I didn't go back to the barn. I couldn't. For 2 days, I barricaded myself in the house. I slept on the living room couch with the TV volume turned up to 50, drinking cheap instant coffee until my hands shook so bad I couldn't hold a spoon. I told myself I was figuring out a plan. Maybe call a priest. Maybe call the dump. Maybe just pour gasoline on the whole structure and claim the insurance money. But deep down, I knew I was just hiding. But you can't hide from something that's already inside your head. On the third night, the noise changed. It wasn't just the grinding sound coming from the yard anymore. At exactly 3 a.m., the house began to vibrate. It started low, a sub-bass hum that rattled the teaspoons in the drying rack. Then it grew. The floorboards beneath my bare feet buzzed like there was a massive generator running directly under the foundation. RRRHHCLICK. It was loud enough now that I could feel it in my teeth. I covered my ears, curling into a ball on the couch. "Stop it," I whimpered. "Just stop." But the vibration wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the pull. It's hard to describe if you haven't felt it. Imagine the feeling of being underwater, holding your breath until your lungs burn, desperate for air. Now imagine that air is inside that barn. I felt a physical hook behind my navel, tugging me. A psychic itch in the center of my brain that screamed one word over and over. Go. I tried to fight it. I grabbed the door frame of the kitchen, digging my fingernails into the wood until they splintered. But my legs were moving on their own. It was like sleepwalking, but I was fully, terrifyingly awake. I found myself unlocking the back door. The cold night air hit me, but I didn't feel it. The noise from the barn was deafening, now a cacophony of wood splintering and groaning, like a ship breaking apart in a storm. I crossed the wet grass. The mud squelched between my toes. I didn't have a flashlight this time. I didn't need one. I threw the barn doors open. Silence. The moment the doors swung wide, the noise cut out instantly. The vibration stopped. The world went dead still. The overhead lights were off, but the desk was glowing. A faint, sickly luminescence pulsed from the center of it, casting long dancing shadows against the walls. The 13th drawer was open. It was wider this time, maybe 6 inches. And it was empty. I walked toward it, my resistance gone. I stood directly in front of the desk, looking down into that impossible, bottomless slot. I didn't see a photo this time. I didn't see anything. But I felt it. A wave of intense, suffocating hunger washed over me. It wasn't my hunger. It was projected outward from the drawer, a starving, desperate vacuum that sucked the warmth right out of the air. It felt like standing next to a black hole that was trying to inhale the universe. It wanted something. It needed something. And I knew, with a sick, absolute certainty, that it wouldn't let me leave until I fed it. The compulsion was a physical weight, crushing the air out of my lungs. The drawer didn't speak, but the demand was screaming in my blood. Give. I scrambled backward, my hands grasping blindly at the workbench behind me. I didn't think. I couldn't think. I just needed the pressure to stop before my head exploded. My fingers curled around a handle. A heavy-duty Phillips head screwdriver with a yellow rubber grip. It was a good tool, one I'd had for years. I lunged forward and threw it. I didn't aim. I just hurled the tool into the black gap between the pedestals. The reaction was instantaneous and violent. Bang! The drawer didn't slide shut. It slammed with the force of a bear trap snapping onto a leg. The sound was like a gunshot, echoing off the metal roof of the barn. The floorboards jumped under my feet. And then, silence. The sickly glow vanished. The vibration in the floor stopped. The crushing weight in my skull lifted so suddenly, I nearly fell over. The air in the barn returned to normal. Cold, dusty, silent. I stood there panting, clutching my chest. The desk was just a desk again. 12 drawers. Closed. I ran. I didn't lock the barn. I sprinted back to the house, bolted the door, and collapsed in the hallway. I slept right there on the floor, passing out from sheer adrenaline exhaustion. When I woke up, the sun was streaming through the windows. It was 10 a.m. Birds were singing. For a second, I thought it was a nightmare, a psychotic break induced by stress and solvent fumes. I made coffee. I drank it standing up. Then, against every shred of common sense I had left, I walked back out to the workshop. The barn doors were still open where I'd left them. I walked inside, keeping my distance from the desk. It looked innocent in the daylight, just old wood and brass. I looked at the workbench. My breath hitched. Sitting squarely in the center of the bench, on top of a pile of sandpaper, was the screwdriver, but it wasn't the same. I picked it up. It was hot, painfully hot, like it had just been pulled out of an oven. I almost dropped it. The steel shaft of the screwdriver, which was made of hardened chrome vanadium, had been twisted. Not bent twisted. It looked like someone had taken the metal while it was soft as taffy and spun it into a perfect, tight spiral. The yellow rubber handle was scorched black, and it smelled of ozone and sulfur. I held the ruined tool up to the light. The metal was covered in faint, microscopic etchings. They looked like fingerprints, but the ridges were too close together, too sharp. I realized then that the drawer hadn't just eaten the tool. It had chewed on it, and it had spat it back out because it wasn't what it really wanted. I couldn't stay in the house with that thing. Not without knowing what it was. I grabbed the crumpled receipt from the estate sale out of the trash. It was stained with coffee grounds, but the liquidator's number was still legible. I called him from my truck, parked 3 miles down the road at a gas station. The safety of the fluorescent lights and the mundane hum of traffic felt like a lifeline. It took $50 and a lot of begging, but the liquidator finally gave me the contact information for the family. The previous owner was a man named Elias Thorne. His daughter, a woman named Martha, lived 2 states away in New Hampshire. I dialed the number. My hands were shaking so bad I hit the wrong digit twice. Hello? Her voice was sharp, guarded. Miss Thorne?
I don't know.
I started, trying to keep my voice steady. My name is... well, it doesn't matter. I bought a piece of furniture from your father's estate last week. The roll-top desk. The line went dead silent. Not the silence of a dropped call, but the silence of someone holding their breath. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice dropping an octave. We sold everything, no returns. I don't want a refund, I said quickly. I need to ask you about the drawers, specifically the middle one, the one that appears at night. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Then, a sound I didn't expect. She started crying. It was a jagged, terrified sound, like she was trying to stifle a scream. You opened it, she whispered. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said, and I tried to feed it. Miss Thorne, please, what is it? I told him to burn it, she sobbed. I told the liquidator to burn the whole house down, but he wanted the commission. Oh God. Miss Thorne, listen to me. It bent a steel screwdriver like it was clay. It's hungry. What happens if I don't feed it? Her weeping stopped abruptly. The shift in her tone chilled me more than the crying. She sounded hollow, resigned. My father, she said, her voice trembling, didn't die of a heart attack like the obituary said. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. How did he die? He was a collector. He loved that desk. At first, it just took trinkets, coins, watches, fountain pens. He thought it was a miracle, a portal to somewhere else. But then it stopped taking metal. It stopped taking glass. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead, remembering the twisted screwdriver. It spit the tool back out, I whispered. It wants life, mister. She paused, realizing she didn't know my name. It wants life. My father started with bugs, then mice, then the neighbor's strays. But the hunger, it grows. It always grows. Miss Thorne, I said, my voice barely a croak. What happened to your father? We found him in the study, she said. Or most of him. He was slumped over the desk. His right arm was inside the central drawer, up to the shoulder, when the coroner tried to pull him away. She choked on a sob. There was nothing below the elbow. It had taken the bone, the meat, everything. And the drawer, it was closed. He ran out of things to give it, she whispered. So he gave himself. How do I stop it? I screamed into the phone. People at the gas pumps turned to look at me. How do I get rid of it? You can't, she said. You accepted the deal when you opened the 13th drawer. You can't sell it. You can't burn it. It's yours until you're empty. The line clicked. She had hung up. I sat there in the cab of my truck, staring at the cheerful advertisements on the gas pump screen. 2 for $5. Energy drinks. Fresh hot dogs. The sun was setting. The shadows were getting long. And I had to go back. I tried to be smart. I thought I could outwit a piece of furniture. I spent the hours before midnight raiding my kitchen and the garage. I filled a plastic bucket with things that had life, but weren't alive. Raw hamburger meat from the freezer. A carton of eggs. A bag of potting soil with worms in it. I even caught a field mouse in a humane trap near the woodpile. I was shaking as I walked into the barn at 2:55 a.m. The air was already thick, pressurized like the inside of a diving bell. At 3 a.m. sharp, the 13th drawer appeared. It didn't slide open slowly this time. It shot out with a wet thwack, hitting the stops hard enough to rock the entire heavy oak frame. The hunger hit me instantly. It was worse than before. It wasn't just a headache. It was a migraine that felt like a red-hot spike being driven behind my eyes. My vision blurred. I fell to my knees, retching bile onto the concrete floor. Here! I screamed, blindly grabbing a handful of the raw hamburger meat. I flung it into the black void. Hiss. The meat didn't fall. It sizzled, like I'd thrown it onto a hot skillet, and then was violently ejected. The drawer spat the wad of beef back at me with the force of a pitching machine. It slapped against my chest, steaming and gray, smelling of burnt hair and spoiled milk. I tried the eggs. They exploded mid-air before even touching the wood. I tried the soil. It blew back in a cloud of dust that blinded me. The mouse was next. I reached for the cage, but the pain in my head spiked so hard I blacked out for a split second. I flailed, my arm sweeping across the workbench to catch my balance. My hand found the jagged edge of a metal paint scraper I'd left out. I felt the slice before the pain. A clean, deep cut across the meat of my palm. Ah, damn it, I yelled, clutching my hand to my chest. Blood welled up, dark and fast, dripping down my wrist. A drop of it hit the floor. Splat. The drawer went silent. The grinding noise, the vibration in the walls, it all paused. I looked up. The drawer was still open, waiting. But the frantic, angry energy had shifted. It felt attentive. I took a step forward, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I held my bleeding hand over the open drawer. I let a single heavy drop of crimson blood fall into the abyss. It didn't hit a bottom. It didn't hiss. As the blood vanished into the dark, a sound rose up from the desk. A low, vibrating purr. It sounded like a cat the size of a lion, deep and resonant. The relief was instantaneous. And God help me, it was beautiful. The pain in my head vanished, replaced by a wash of endorphins so powerful my knees buckled. It was better than morphine. It was better than sex. It was a warm, golden wave of pure safety. The fear evaporated, replaced by a sickening, cozy gratitude. I squeezed my hand, milking the cut. Drip, drip, drip. With every drop, the purring got louder. The wood of the desk seemed to flush, the oak turning a richer, deeper red in the dim light. I fed it until I was dizzy, until the floor tilted under my feet. Only then did the drawer slide shut, softly, gently, like a mother tucking a child into bed. I I stumbled back to the house, wrapping my hand in a dirty shop rag. I felt light, floaty. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall with a stupid smile on my face. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was feeding a monster, but as I drifted off to sleep, my only thought was how good it would feel to do it again tomorrow night. It's been 2 weeks since that first drop of blood, or maybe 3. Time has become a fluid, slippery thing, measured only in the hours between feedings. I don't look like myself anymore. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the hallway mirror this morning and nearly screamed. My skin has taken on the color of wet putty. My eyes are sunken deep into dark, bruised sockets, bloodshot and twitching. I've lost 20 pounds. My belt is cinched to the last hole, and my jeans still hang off my hips like I'm a scarecrow. I'm always cold now. No matter how high I crank the thermostat, the chill sits inside my marrow. It's the anemia. I know that. I'm bleeding myself dry, ounce by ounce, night after night. My left arm is a ruin. From the wrist to the elbow, it's a crosshatch of scabs, fresh cuts, and angry, inflamed tissue. I've had to start on my right arm. I wear long sleeves even when I'm alone, ashamed to look at what I've done to myself. But the worst part isn't the pain. It's the anticipation. All day long, I feel sick, anxious, trembling like a junkie waiting for a fix. But the moment the clock strikes 3 a.m. and I stand over that open drawer with a razor blade, I feel love. I feel a connection so profound it makes me weep. It's a toxic, parasitic bond, and it's killing me. Yesterday, I hit my breaking point. I woke up on the workshop floor again, dried blood crust on my sleeve, feeling like my heart was fluttering like a dying bird. I looked at the desk. In the daylight, it sat there, majestic and silent, the oak gleaming innocently. Rage, hot and sudden, finally burned through the fog of my exhaustion. "No more," I croaked. I stumbled to the tool wall and grabbed the heaviest thing I owned, a 10-pound splitting maul with a fiberglass handle. I didn't care about the resale value. I didn't care about the history. I wanted to turn that cursed wood into kindling. I marched up to the desk. I raised the maul over my head, my weakened muscles screaming at the weight. "Eat this!" I screamed. I brought the sledge down with every ounce of strength I had left, aiming dead center where the 13th drawer appeared at night. Clang. It didn't sound like wood. It didn't sound like hitting a solid object. It sounded like hitting a massive, hollow church bell made of titanium. The noise was deafening, a high-pitched resonance that shattered the windows of the workshop instantly. The shockwave traveled up the handle of the maul, vibrating through my bones so hard my teeth clacked together. The head of the maul's solid forged steel didn't just bounce off. It exploded. Shrapnel flew backward like a frag grenade. I felt a searing line of fire across my cheekbone, missing my right eye by a fraction of an inch. I dropped the handle and fell backward, clutching my face. Blood, my blood, again poured through my fingers. I looked at the desk through my watering eyes. There wasn't a scratch on it. Not a dent, not a chip in the varnish. The wood looked pristine, almost smug. And then I heard it. A low, soft sound coming from the locked interior of the desk. It was laughing. A wet, gurgling chuckle that sounded like bubbles rising through thick mud. I crawled out of the barn on my hands and knees, leaving a trail of red drops behind me. I knew then that violence wouldn't work. It wouldn't let me destroy it. It was protecting its food source. I ran dry last night. I mean that literally. When the clock hit 3 a.m. and the drawer slammed open, I was ready. I was sitting in the chair I've dragged into the barn, shivering under 3 blankets, the razor blade poised over my right forearm. There's hardly any unmarked skin left there, just a roadmap of scabs and scar tissue. I sliced. I pressed down hard, wincing as the blade parted the skin, but nothing came out. Just a sluggish, dark ooze that clotted almost instantly. My body has nothing left to give. I am a husk. I squeezed my arm, massaging the tissue, begging for just a few drops to satisfy the screaming void in front of me. The desk knew. The purring sound didn't start. Instead, the silence in the barn deepened. The temperature dropped so fast that frost bloomed in fractal patterns on the metal casing of my work lamp. The drawer remained open, waiting. "I can't," I whispered, my voice a dry rasp. "I don't have any more." I leaned forward, my head swimming with dizziness, and peered into the darkness of the 13th drawer. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping to see the bottom. Maybe I was hoping to see an end. For the first time, something moved in the dark. It It wasn't a shadow. It was pale, sickly, translucent white, like the belly of a deep-sea fish that has never seen the sun. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by a sudden, primal spike of adrenaline that froze my muscles rigid. A hand rose out of the abyss. It gripped the edge of the drawer, pulling itself up. But it wasn't a human hand. The fingers were too long, possessing at least 2 extra joints each. They moved with a jerky, insectoid rhythm, clicking softly as the bones articulated. The skin was wet, coated in a thick, clear slime that smelled of ammonia and ancient stagnant water. I stared at it, horrified, mesmerized. The fingernails were black and cracked, looking more like obsidian glass than keratin. Then, a second hand joined it. They weren't reaching for the blood on my arm. They were reaching for me. One of the pale, multi-jointed fingers stretched out. It moved impossibly fast, snapping forward like a striking cobra. It touched my face. The contact was agonizing. It wasn't cold like the room. It was searing hot. It felt like being branded with a cattle iron. I tried to scream, but my throat seized up. The finger traced the line of my jaw, then moved up to the fresh cut on my cheek from the axe shard. It tapped the wound. Tap, tap, tap. It was testing the meat, checking the quality. A voice entered my head. Not a sound, but a thought that wasn't mine. It tasted like copper and felt like a migraine. Almost ripe. With a wet, slurping sound, the hands released their grip on the drawer and slipped back down into the void. The drawer didn't slam shut this time. It slid closed slowly, silently, with a terrifying finality. I fell out of the chair, clutching my face. The smell of burning flesh filled the small space. I crawled back to the house, vomiting dry heaves into the grass. When I finally got to the bathroom mirror, I pulled my hand away. There is a fingerprint burned into my left cheek. It's not a smudge of soot. The skin is gray and dead, necrotic, in the perfect shape of a long, spindly finger, and it's spreading. I can see the gray edges creeping outward, millimeter by millimeter, turning my skin into ash. I did the only thing I could do. I'm not proud of it. God, I'm so sorry. I couldn't destroy it. I couldn't feed it. So I listed it. I put the ad up on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace at 6 a.m. this morning. I didn't ask for money. I just typed, free to a good home. 19th century roll top desk. Heavy. Must pick up today. My phone blew up instantly. People love free things. They love the idea of a bargain, of finding a hidden treasure. They don't think about why something so valuable would be free. They don't ask about the stain on the floor, where it stood, or why the cellar looks like a walking corpse. A young couple's on their way now. They just texted me. They're 10 minutes out with a U-Haul. They sounded so excited on the phone. They're restoring an old farmhouse in Stowe. They said it would be perfect for the study. I'm sitting on my front porch with a bag packed. I'm leaving the moment that truck pulls out of my driveway. I don't know where I'm going. Maybe west. Maybe just keep driving until the ocean stops me. I just need to put distance between me and that barn. The burn mark on my face is throbbing. It's turned a deep, necrotic black, and the skin around it is peeling. I can feel the infection spreading into my jaw. A cold numbness that tastes like copper. I don't think it's gonna heal. I think I've been marked, branded like cattle, so it can find me again when I'm ripe. But maybe, just maybe, if it has a new food source, it will forget about me. I'm writing this as a confession. I need someone to know. I need to put this out into the world so that maybe, if one of you sees a listing for a massive quarter-sawn oak desk in the Vermont area, you'll keep scrolling. If you see it, don't look at the symmetry. Don't count the drawers. And for the love of God, if a 13th drawer opens for you, do not give it a single drop. I hear the truck rumbling up the gravel road now. It's a heavy diesel engine. The sound reminds me of the grinding noise, and my hands are shaking so bad I can barely type. The desk knows they're coming. I went into the barn one last time to unlock the doors for them. The wood was warm to the touch. It felt excited. I fed it for weeks. I poured my life into that wood. It's not just hungry anymore. It's strong. And I'm afraid I've just handed a loaded gun to 2 innocent people. They're pulling in. I have to go.